In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to get from your idea to your image and block it out on the surface. So first of all, whenever I'm starting a work of art, I start with either a word or an object, and I build around that to come up with the composition. So here I started out just by looking at some images that I wanted to see in my painting. The plants from my yard, photos of some fish at the Seattle Aquarium that I took a few years ago. And I was making blind and semi-blind contour drawings. And what this means is that I was looking at my image, and as my eye moved around the outline of the image, my pencil moved as well. And so it's sort of a loose way of drawing. It frees you from the burden of making things exactly the way that you see them, because you're not looking at the paper, you're just sort of feeling around the contour. A semi-blind contour, you are looking down periodically to like put the eye in the right place or, connect the stem, but still spending more time looking at the thing or imagining the thing that you're drawing instead of the drawing itself. So I would encourage you to try that if you haven't already. And as I drew these things, then I looked them up to figure out, what do they mean? Is there some sort of symbolism attached to them aside from, maybe the personal ideas I have about them? So I made some notes on my sketch. And then from there, I made my study. Okay, so a study is a sketch that you make. It can be as loose or as detailed as you want. But it's a sketch that you make on a small scale in preparation for a larger work of art. A study can serve as a guide for your composition, and it's a way to figure out how things are going to work on a slightly bigger scale. And you can deal with some of the compositional pitfalls that might occur if you were just to jump straight from your sketches to the canvas. And one big one that I'm seeing right now is that both of these fish, they're sort of living in the same spot on the paper. And so when I get to canvas, I know I'm going to move that guy over just a little bit to the right. And this will help to create more movement, and it'll get rid of that visual tension that's happening right down the center of the painting. There's something called the rule of thirds, where you've got 3 different quadrants, and you want to avoid putting anything, and they run vertically and horizontally. You want to avoid putting anything like smack dab in the middle. But also what I like to do and how I use it is just I avoid lining things up, right? So the tops of the leaves are lining up in different places, and that's going to create a little bit more movement and variety in the composition. So right away, I've caught that in my study, where I've drawn the lines dissecting my study into quarters, and I put those same lines on the space of my picture plane. And that's just going to help me to see, to focus on these individual sections and deal with it in a way that's not quite as overwhelming as just trying to re-sketch everything. And also, I'm not using pencil here. I'm using paint, a little bit of yellow paint with some water to help things move. So remember I talked about how those fish heads were just sort of lined up. So I dragged a line straight down. It's called a sight line. And I'm going to use that to help me move my fish over just a little bit. And it doesn't really look like a fish right now, right? It looks like a blob. That's what this process is. If you're using your paint to sketch things out, you're just loosely suggesting hey, this plant is going to live here. It's going to take up approximately, this much space. And then you'll come in later in blocking out and flesh it out even a little bit more. Okay, and I like to use yellow paint if I am laying out my painting like this, because the yellow is going to get absorbed into pretty much any color palette. Okay. All right, so that's one way to do it. And I've got my horizon line back here. So I've got my general idea. And then I can start to block it out. When you're blocking in your canvas, you're starting with your flat wash brush, get it a little wet, and then dab it dry. And all you're going to do at this phase is pick a base color for each of your objects. And I'm dipping my paintbrush into the side of the pile of paint. And I've got about a tablespoon of each color. Dipping your brush into the side allows you to get color without muddying up the entire glob of paint. And this is going to be really useful because as you're blocking out, you're switching colors without rinsing your paintbrush. All right, so dipping into the side, getting little bits of paint as I go, and I'm sweeping this brush to just loosely mark out the base color for the image. And I'm staying loose, right? All right, so I just like to sweep the color around until it's off of my brush. And then I'll switch and I'll just start picking up my next color. So I haven't rinsed my brush. Blocking out is quick. It shouldn't take very much time at all. You're just laying down the foundation. Okay, and so even though I had some brown in my brush, it's all right. I'm not super concerned about it mixing in with the green because so many more layers are going to go on top. Okay, and you would just continue along like this, blocking out your base color for all of the main items in your composition. No details at this point, right? You're just looking at what is the dominant color in each object and how quickly can you get it in there. Even if you've used the wrong color, you can paint over it later as you continue to build this up. And the way that I'm painting with little bits of paint each time, it's just enough color so that it falls off of my brush as I'm painting. If you have any big globs, smooth them out. If they're not smoothing out and the paint just feels gloppy, that means that you're getting too much paint. So instead of scooping paint, just touch the paint and make a few strokes on the surface of your plate. So I'm touching into the side, making a few strokes to flatten it out. If your green is too green, get a little bit of red on there. You're not mixing on your palette. You are mixing on the canvas at this point. Okay. All right. So once my big images are in there, then I can deal with the background and the foreground. I think in the background, I would like it to be this sort of really light pink. It's just really warm, welcoming space in the background. I've got some green on my brush. Instead of rinsing, just going to wipe it off on my paper towel and get a little bit of color. And then just keep adding white until I get that filled in. And even though I wiped out the green, it's turning into this sort of smoky purple color. And that's okay because, once again, I will continue to build over top of this. And sometimes it's nice to see a slightly darker color showing through or a contrasting color showing through that you didn't plan on. The reason that I'm not rinsing my brush, and I don't want you to rinse your brush either, is because when you stop to rinse your brush, your brain turns to another function. It's like you're moving into correcting mode instead of creating mode. And so I try my best to not rinse my brush or rinse as little as possible. You know, sometimes you can't help it and you need to rinse your brush. especially once you get into the details, but right now it's not necessary, okay? If you realize that you need to adjust some of your shapes, do that with a little bit of white paint, right? Cut into something, make something bigger, or make something a little bit smaller. I'm gonna make this leaf just a little bit bigger. And if you feel your brush dragging on the surface, get a small amount of water to help it move. All right, so from here, I think that I will rinse because I want to put a little bit of orange into the foreground, and I don't want it to be muddy. And check out how I'm handling the brush, okay? Big sweeping motions, okay? Coming in along the edges of things, but not being concerned about painting over them or painting into them.